Hola, I'm Annie, and I'm made to amuse. The biggest reason to tune your favorite cars is to continue making them better as you drive them. Compared to getting a tune that was shared from a fellow racer, these should all be considered temporary and are at risk of being gone forever later down the road. More often than not, it's not worth tuning most of your collection, as there are many cars we end up driving out of necessity. If you need a car for a championship or another event and you don't plan driving it again, one of the top suggested tunes will get you through. On the other hand, when I get cars that I love in some way or another, I take some time to add custom paint and tune them to my liking. Now that I've given the 1999 Dodge Viper a paint job that I like, the next step is to get her tuned. The tuning process gives you a chance to add a few racetracks to your comfort zone. You want to test your tune and the conditions on the type of terrain you will be driving it in. Starting off, I like to tune my car for road races in dry conditions, meaning Rivals is the best game mode to test it in. Let's not get ahead of ourselves though. First, we need a custom upgrade for the car. There are a few ways to go about this, but initially, it's a good call to find a shared starter tune with the class and stats that fit the tune you want to make. Once you install a tune on your car for the first time, you can go into Tunes and Custom Upgrades. This will remove your previous tune from your car. Luckily, when you go to the upgrade screen for each part, you can see some of them are marked as owned. So if you select all of these parts, you can easily recreate the base structure for the tune you downloaded. And now, you get to refine the tune the way you like it and modify the parts as you see fit. If you swap parts in the racing tune, just make sure to get it back to the top of its class before tuning the car. In my case, I wanted my PI to be 900, so it's the top of the S1 class. In the upgrade shop, I like to start with the conversions and work my way up to the engine last. I added all the conversions that were available, all the aero, and for the tires, I went with an off-road compound. I also maxed out the options for my back tires and left the front tires stock. I went with the 7-speed race transmission, race driveline, and race diff. I left the brakes stock and added race springs, both anti-roll bars, the sport roll cage, and maximum weight reduction. From here, I could afford all of the engine upgrades and I was ready to tweak my tune. The next challenge is to find a tuning calculator that works on the version of Forza you're playing. First, I tried Forzatuner.com, as it claims to be updated for FH5, and it doesn't even require you to download their app. Alas, I was a little disappointed with the stats it spit out for the 1999 Dodge Viper. It was suggesting to drastically stiffen my springs and anti-roll bars. Another thing it suggested was tire pressures that were much higher than I was willing to use. So after a bunch of trial and error with Forzatuner calcs, I decided to just go back to the drawing board. Since I've always had good luck with Forza Quicktune, this car was in Forza Horizon 4, so I ended up comparing the previous settings to the ones they suggested, and the car drove much more my speed. Here's to hoping they release an FH5 version of their tuning app, and soon. If all else fails, you can find a similar car from FH4 and at least get a good starting point. After researching how to tune a car in FH5, I learned more about tuning theory. and there was a variety of settings that you might want to consider when tweaking your tune. After refining each section, you'll want to test it, and there is another list of issues and fixes you might need. Let's check out each area we get to tune. First, we get to set our front and back tire pressure. Here we can control grip and responsiveness. Similar to real-world physics, lower tire pressures give you better grip in low traction conditions. In FH5, tire pressures that break traction easily are much higher, and they have less contact with the road. In contrast, if your tires are too low, you will lose your optimal response time. I like to keep most of my racing setups between 26 and 30. Gearing can be fun to play with. A lot of times, all you really want is to adjust your final drive. If you upgrade the transmission, you get to fine-tune each gear. But this can also add more weight to your setup, especially the ones with 8 gears or more. Adjusting each gear can be tricky to get right at first, so I like to use a tuning calculator to get into the ballpark. For this part, I did use Forzatuner as the FH4 transmission did not have as many gears. Once I have my baseline for each gear, I can adjust the sliders until the map on the bottom right creates a gradual arc from first to last. In the end, you want to find a balance between your acceleration and your top speed. If you notice too much red line between the gears, they need to be adjusted in relation to each other. Alignment will help us get the wheels and the suspensions in sync with the rest of the car. Camber controls how much contact your tires make with the road in the middle of a turn, where you want the negative camber to push the top of your wheels, and that makes them closer to the car. Toe affects the direction of your tires, and usually you want to stick with 0. A slight positive toe will give you better responsiveness. Caster affects the angle of your suspension, and you generally want something between 5 and 8. I went with a calculated value for my caster. Anti-roll bars connect both sides of your suspension. Softening the front anti-roll bar too much can introduce oversteer, whereas softening the back can lead to understeer. I like to have my anti-roll bars on the softer side. Since my numbers came from Quicktune, I was able to report balance issues to the calculator, and it gave me new numbers to fix my understeer issue. Another setting where I will lean towards the soft side are the springs. If you need to balance your springs, it's important to note when the front springs are too soft, it can lead to oversteer, and when the back springs are too soft, it can lead to understeer. If the bumps are too choppy, soften the springs and lower the ride height. Damping affects how quickly your springs compress and expand. I will lean on the tuning calculator for both rebound and bump. Aero gives your car more downforce and can be tuned to top speed or better handling with corner. I always like to max the front aero and set the back as low as possible. Brakes affect how fast you can come to a complete stop. And if you can adjust the balance towards the front wheels, you're gonna have more responsive brakes. Here I decided I didn't need them, and as an ABS user, I think the result is fine. The diff controls how much power is going into the car and impacts your car's understeer or oversteer. I will just roll with the Quicktune settings on this one. Once you've tweaked your setup, it's time to install the changes and test it out. You'll want to test it on the terrain or track that fits your tuning purpose. If you go to your settings and choose Advanced Controls, you can switch ANA to Telemetry. You can also tune your car at any event and change your difficulty to suit your current test. A mixed race with corners and straights is a great place to test for understeer, when you think that you should have turned in more, or oversteer, when you think you turned in too much. On straights, you can check if there's too much red line between the gears, and if you're getting to your top speed or not. Heat allows you to test your tire pressure, but if you don't have damage turned on, you might not be able to test this. If the desired output is mostly yellow on the turns, you're good, but don't want too much red. Tires Miscellaneous allows you to check the camber and make sure it doesn't exceed negative 0.5, or if you get into the positive camber while turning. If this happens, you have too much camber in your setup. Suspension allows you to check your springs. When looking at the telemetry, you want to make sure the pink bars don't disappear or fill the entire bar. We are looking for a pretty even display where mostly they appear in the middle. If you don't want to see the gauges too high or too low over the bumps. If you need help tweaking your tune past the calculator, worry not. There are various issues to check based on how your car is performing. The best way to test these is to find a track you know and try to match the driving line as much as possible. If you're doing really good, you can also aim to beat your personal best and rivals. If you're too far right of the target driving line, you need to consider fixes for understeer. And if you're too far left of the driving line, you need to consider fixes for oversteer. It tends to be easier to stay on the driving line on the straights, but when you get into the corners, you can really tell where the problem lies. If I'm too far right of the driving line around a corner, chances are I might miss the checkpoint altogether. To fix understeer when you are entering the corner, there are several settings that can help. However, you might want to make one change at a time, or at least use one click on each area before tweaking it further. In contrast, if I'm too far left of the driving line when entering the corner, there are another handful of settings to tweak and correct oversteer. I recommend fixing the first issue before driving into the next one. If you've got the corner entry unlocked, then you need to consider if you are too far right or left of the driving line when completing the corner. If I'm having trouble following the driving line at the end of the corner, I will need to tweak the diff and the anti-roll bars in opposite ways to achieve the desired result. Next, you might want to hone in your gearing, and this is good to test in manual as well as automatic. You might experience slowdown when you are driving in a straight line, and for my S1900, this is really not okay. On the other hand, if your wheels are spinning in first gear, you will not have the launch you need to get off the driving line, or make great progress in the racing event at hand. I don't play with damage on, so the tires not heating up aren't a big deal for me. If you find you care about this, you can adjust your toe. If the car is losing control after hitting bumps, you might need to go back and tweak your suspension. Increasing brake responsiveness is also hurting the top speed, so I find that I don't really want to change these settings, and I also can't because they are locked on my setup. If it's worth it to you, there are a few things you can try. Lastly, the 1999 Dodge Viper is very back heavy, and it wants to drift. If you experience the wheels spinning after transferring the weight from one side to the other, and you don't want to be drifting as a result, then you need to tweak a few settings. Every tune can be perfected again and again. This is why it's most important to like the car that you're driving and the track that you're driving it on. Remember, if you don't think you're making any progress, take a break and try something else for a while. Good luck with your tunes. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye!